Hello everyone, after a brief detour to Monkey Island and my sickness getting better, I'm back with another video. Because shit, that video did well. I'll be talking about female witchers, lore, a little bit about fan reactions to them, along with a brand new theory I came up with about how Ciri might have managed to become a witcher. If you want to skip to any specific parts, check the time codes below. I suspect this will be a bit of a long video, so feel free just to stick here in the background while you do something else. I'll mostly just be looping trailer footage in the background and will direct your attention to screen if needed. Just before I begin, I want to say that I've watched Neonight's video about more or less this same subject after finishing my script. His video is much more well edited and does talk about incredibly similar stuff to what I'll be talking about here, but I do also recommend checking out his video. I've watched his What Would Geralt Do series, and I knew he had a good grasp on the universe and the characters, so I didn't want his video to influence mine when I was writing the actual script. Although I have been toying around with the idea of this video since more or less the trailer reaction or the trailer breakdown, and starting to get the comments and stuff like that, and seeing people's reaction to it. I want to do this video, but I was too sick to be able to actually to do anything. I will just say though, he does talk about Rogue Mage as if it's canon. It isn't. It doesn't break his arguments or anything. It doesn't ruin his points, and he actually talks about the new Witcher book, which I didn't even realize was out in Poland. I cannot wait for that to be made available in English. I'm going to fucking read the shit out of that. Regardless, it's a great video. I completely agree with his conclusions, and I think he has also I really hope that his idea about like Ciri and what the story might be is actually true, because it sounds really interesting. I'm not really going to talk about like what I think Witcher 4 is going to be about. I'm just talking about female witchers and this one theory. But why she might have undergone the trial, he talks about that, and I think that's really interesting. So check it out. It's only about 15 minutes, so much shorter than this. Starting off, we need to address something big. Have there ever been female witches in any continuity of The Witcher? Not just the definitive, like, you know, the book canon, the game canon. Have there ever been any? Well, there's 2, 3, depending on your criteria. Now, unless there's like some specific, like, Polish comic or unofficial short story that I've never heard of, Adela is the first female witcher to appear in any sort of canon. She is from the series Hexer, a Polish adaptation of the original short stories created in, I think it was 2001, the year before I was born. You can watch it all on the Internet Archive, and there's even an AI 1080p remaster, although I really don't recommend it. I was watching it, and like, it removes like all of the skin detail and like the texture on their clothing, and it looked, so everything looks weirdly smooth, and some of the movement is also a bit odd. I highly recommend episode 4, the Golden Dragon story. It's pretty accurate from what I remember. And I feel like Geralt in that series is more or less spot on for how, like, his personality in the books, I think is really good. And like, the actor who played Geralt went on to play like Johnny Silverhand in 2077, and he also does Geralt's Polish voice in the Netflix series, so, you know. Returning though to the video subject, Adela was a young girl who Geralt rescued after her family were killed by the Witchers in the mountains, who then stole the goods they were carrying to feed the other Witchers. Afterwards, she was trained with other women who live behind Morhen Mountain, and are referred to as cousins in the subtitles. These seem to be an all-female Witcher school, and are clearly Witchers, and she even expresses surprise that Geralt isn't asexual. That is a whole other Hexer thing I'm not going to get into right now. Although I might do a video comparison to Hexer, like to Netflix at some point. That could be interesting. The basics, at least, though, about her is that she survived the Trial of the Grasses, along with the other girls on that side of the mountains. There doesn't seem to be any major difference between them and the male ones. They're just female witchers. The second female witcher is from... Yeah, I can't read that. Witcher, A Game of Imagination. The original TTRPG before R. Talsorian's version. It was mainly based on the book lore, from what I'm aware, and focused on expanding out that lore. And that was like either teased or left mostly blank. From what I can also tell, it created the building blocks for a lot of stuff that CDPR would later go on to use, such as Ophir, Zeracania, giving a lot more history and information about the Northern Realms and much more. A lot of this lore, as I said, I believe has been taken and remixed by CDPR for their Witcher games, and they even originally planned to use the TTRPG map for the video game. The Witcher's name is Dragonfly, born around the 1150s to Duchess Diarrhea. That cannot be how you meant to pronounce that. Basically, while her dad was fighting a Hydra, he called on a cat witcher to help, using the Law of Surprise as payment. Dragonfly was taken to Striga Castle and was mutated into one of the more emotionless cat witches you'd find there, before Gezras of Leda, the half-elf witcher, led a sort of revolt that created the second school of the cat most people are more familiar with. But that's CDPR lore. Eventually her brother shows up, there's a whole other thing, and that's just not relevant to this video. Despite that though, she is the Witcher explicitly stated to have gone through the Trial of the Grasses and survived. Once again, there was no further justification for like a female Witcher to exist, which I find interesting. While I can't go back and see what people's reactions to these two women were back in the day, as I don't have the skills in internet archaeology and it would all be in, Polish, means I can't just assume that they went over poorly or well. However, from my own experience, I never questioned how they came into being. I kind of just simply bought them and like their survival of the trials with no further questions, and I have kind of been wondering why. This is where we turn to Netflix for I wouldn't say honorable mention. In season 2, the last season I watched, Ciri convinces Vesemir to have her undergo the Trial of the Grasses. There's no question on if she'll survive, if memory serves, but I remember questioning it myself as to if this was even possible in a way that I didn't do with Dragonfly and Adela. Why? Nightmare of the Wolf. And season 2 in general. There are so many witches shown in the Netflix version, and not a single one is a woman, which is surprising because I don't remember them trying to do any sort of gender commentary for this, which is what I would assume as to why they would keep from adding female witches, is that they would want to do some sort of gender commentary. The games have this too. If you've engaged with Gwent, then you've probably seen dozens of witchers. Most are from the Wolf and the Cat School, but we now know of at most 2 witchers from every school, including the Order of Witchers, ignoring the links in the room. I think this is what stretches people's ability to believe female witchers could exist in CDPR's universe. Looking at their canon, while they've never stated that female witchers don't exist or that they're not possible, they've never included any. Most of this comes from the TTRPG, which has been confirmed as canon and is why the fans have been starved for 2 years as Witcher 4 has been in development. In the Witcher's Journal, we learn that the first batch of Witcher students to be mutated, of about 33 that survived training, all the girls died and only a handful of boys lived. No other mention of girls being tested in that book. On the free expansion for magical witches, in a sidebar, it says, and I quote, "At one point, an attempt was even made to apply the mutations to the acolytes of the famed warrior women of Zerrikania. These initial experiments were deemed inconclusive." Which is more likely to help the game master, the people who run the game, to come up with potential story ideas for their players. Lastly, there is the sidebar in the core rulebook, which states, "Historically, there are no known female witchers, due to the nature of the trial of the grasses," and then concludes that it's up to the GM if they exist. That feels a little bit like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, with the nature of the trials and no known, as it could imply that the trials make it impossible, and also implies that it is unknown if any survived, which leaves the implication being that some could survive. I also have a first edition copy of the book, which has all of the typos and mistakes, so maybe part of that has changed, but I'm not aware of it. All this is to transition into the most common argument for female witches not existing that I've seen. They cannot survive the trial of the grasses. This, as far as I've seen, has never been stated in any canon. When Triss first met Ciri, she assumed she was a girl who had undergone the trial, before checking and realizing that she hadn't, and then concluding that the Witchers summoned her here to help them put Ciri through the trial. The books never say anything about female witches, although I do personally believe that Triss's assumption about Ciri and the trials can be interpreted, and I know not everyone agrees with this, that female witchers are not unheard of in the books. We know very little about the other schools in the books, to the point that we don't even know them as schools. I think that was a game of imagination thing, referring to the different groups as, like, schools. From what I remember of the books, there are just wolf, cat, and eagle or griffin witchers. Besides the cats, which got expanded information in Season of Storms, we know nothing about the griffins. Because of all of these, I don't personally feel like witchers are as impossible as others believe on a lore level. It depends on your continuity, of course, as if it's happened before, but in both CDPR and the book lores, they've never outright said women can't survive the process. Finally, this brings me to the theory time. My first theory is the one I proposed in my trailer breakdown. Ciri and the other Lynx Witchers will be given a diluted version of the trials, allowing them to be transformed... Quiet phone. Allowing them to be transformed as adults rather than children. Think of them as the Spartan 4s to the Spartan 2s in Halo. Ciri is the Locke to Geralt's Master Chief. I'm so sorry that I have made that comparison. I've also seen people say that the trial was modified or changed to be performed on Uma back in Witcher 3, but that's not the case.
Of course not. As I was about to say, I'll only apply the first half of the trial.
The rest was not attempted. While pumping myself with cold medicine and failing to fall asleep for 2 nights straight, I had a lot of time to think and connected some dots in my delirious, half-aware brain. Those dots linking to this woman. To talk about who she is, though, we're gonna have to get into some talks about Witcher 1 spoilers. I'll keep it light to begin with and then go heavy later with the spoilers. And I'll put up a second warning there. Skip to the timecode on screen though if you don't want to hear anything about Witcher 1, as I know obviously the remake is on the way and I'm sure there's some people who would rather go into Witcher 1 completely blind. In Witcher 1, the Professor and Azar Javed have been attempting to create new and improved Witchers for a long time. According to Detective Raymond, his son was kidnapped a while ago, probably a couple of years back, and was subjected to these experiments. However, was a failure. Tough break, mate. Later, they would storm Kaer Morhen and steal the mutagens. If you helped the Frightener with the other Witchers, then just over a week later in Chapter 1, they'd already have created the mutant hounds, this thing. If you went with Leo and Triss to stop them from getting to the secrets, like I did, then you won't see mutants until the end of Chapter 3. Once we return to Vizima in Chapter 5, we see a huge array of mutants. And we even see they're capable of speech.
Kill the Witcher.
This is interesting, as part of the goal is to remove their individuality, as that's seen as this weakness. But we can also make some other assumptions, namely that these are adults that are being mutated, because God knows there's a lot of them. As we see with a character I won't spoil yet, capturing soldiers to be transformed is a method they use, and might be what we're seeing them do to have such large numbers. They also might be pulling from their own ranks and another organization that is in association with them, which I also will not spoil. How long did it take for them to get to this stage, however? Going from the shortened time frame of Chapter 3's end to the beginning of Chapter 5, like, how much time has passed? Well, if you've seen my Witcher 1 video, you'll kinda know. In Witcher 2, Geralt says it's been half a year since he woke up outside Kaer Morhen. There's a 1 month time jump between 1 and 2, don't believe the Kingslayer wiki. And at the end of Chapter 1, on the Roach's Path, the Elven month the game is taking place in is mentioned, or at least this chapter is taking place in. Meaning that Chapter 1, at least, ends at some point in either September or early October. However, that would mean Witcher 1 begins in March of 1271, not 1270 at the earliest. However, this might be a retcon, as they say Geralt joined the Wild Hunt on the winter solstice in 1270. Seasons in that world follow our own, and as of recording it is currently the 21st of December, and it is the winter solstice tonight. So, most likely the Witcher's version takes place around the same time. Now in my Witcher saga, I actually put on screen that the prologue begins in December. This is because changing the opening narration, which says that the current year is 1270, to try and explain that actually the game is beginning in March is a bit too complicated. So I ignored it. And just in case anyone's gonna suggest this, the Wild Hunt can't time travel, because if they could, Witcher 3 would be a very different game. And also the timelines of Witcher 1 and 2 still wouldn't match if the first game took place in 1270 and took place over the course of 5 months. So going back to my point, this means going with their minimum amount of time for doing the mutations, Azar manages to go from no mutants to this lot in just over a month. And now we get to his magnum opus. And the big spoilers. Skip on screen. Just give him a minute more. Okay, they're probably gone. This is Rayla. You may know her from the books or Thronebreaker, where it's canon that Meve isn't racist enough to keep her and she leaves. Otherwise, Rayla never gets caught and mutilated, as she does in the books. Rayla is a mercenary and a soldier, mainly for Aedirn, and joined up with the Order of the Flaming Rose likely after Demoven's death, although I'm admittedly not sure how well everything syncs up between the games. It feels like they only had a loose concept for the sequel, rather than a definitive plan on where they were going. Regardless of which path you take, and that she gets caught by the Salamandra, although in the older path you'd see her seemingly die before they capture her and subject her to the mutations. This is the most human any of the mutants look, unless you're looking at the redesigns from the Gwent cards. And on top of that, she is an adult woman who was subjected to an altered version of the Trial of the Grasses. While she may only be able to say Geralt's name, she is the closest thing CDPR has given to an official female Witcher. My theory is that someone finds Azur's notes while clearing out their lair and begins attempting to perfect them, restoring free will to the subjects without losing the wider compatibility of this version of the Trial of the Grasses. Now, we know that Witcher 4 will be set a few years after Witcher 3. However, as Blood and Wine was the last time we can see Ciri, and it's set in 1275, I think it's fair to say it will be a few years after that. Maybe even 1280 to parallel Witcher 1's 1270 start date. Or maybe they'll set it's 5 years after the Third War, placing it in 1277. Although, really with both dates, I actually feel like at most 5 years is kind of a short time frame for a new Witcher school to be entirely established and such. Like, I don't know, it feels like a little bit of a small time frame, but we'll have to see how they're doing it. It might have been a background thing that's been going on. Maybe it began being created in 1273 and we just didn't hear about it because Toussaint is far away. I don't know. While I like this theory, I actually don't think it will be the answer. I feel like they'd go with Elder Blood being the answer as to how she survived. To be cynical, because it's easy, you don't need to give a long explanation as to how things happened. You don't need to go, oh yeah, there was this person and there were these guys and they had this plan and they did all this research and then we got to this. You can just go, she survived because Elder Blood. I don't really think Elder Blood works that way, but well, it wouldn't be the first thing they've changed. List on screen related. One more point. This is something I'm adding after watching the Neon Knight video. While the Karamoran supplies of mutagens are something we know some stuff about, namely that they are around and can be reused by mages, as we see with Yen and Alzur, we don't know much about the other schools. The mutagens that were used for Ciri could have in theory come from any of the other schools, but I thought I'd briefly just speculate on the fates of those for anyone who's interested. The Order of Witchers, their mutagens were probably taken by the final members who moved and rebranded themselves as the School of the Wolf, so we are aware more or less of the fate of those. The bears fled their keep rather than stay and fight for it, so those mutagens were either taken by the attackers or left to be buried under the snow. The Viper School was attacked by the usurper who was looking to bring the Witchers into the military as a sort of super soldier group. So he likely took them, and the secrets are in the possession of Nilfgaard, assuming no Witchers destroyed the information before the keep fell. Both cat schools were attacked, so either the information was destroyed in battle, or captured by the enemy, or simply left where the battle was over. More likely for Striga Castle, less likely for the caravan. The Griffins had their school buried under an avalanche, so it might still be there, while the Manticores have two schools, neither of which have been said to be destroyed. The Day of Fire is more of a thing that happened in the Korath Desert. It didn't happen at either keep, and Zeracanians were really the only ones who were, angry at the Witchers, and I doubt they're going to have crossed the desert. I think I've mentioned this somewhere at some point, but I can't remember. Yeah, so they may actually still have the secrets. The schools could even be running for all we know. And hey, it could be fun if they added that the mutagens were used. And hey, it could be fun if they said that the mutagens used on Ciri were actually some of the mutagens that were used to try and convert the warrior women of Zerrikania into Witchers. Well, that could be cool. To wrap things up, I want to talk about the reasons I've seen people say that they don't want female witches in the universe. I'm admittedly only really going to talk about 2 because those are the main 2 I've seen. I'm sure there's others. The first is that the name Witcher, namely its Polish version, is a masculine word. Same as to how Geralt's horse, Płotka, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is also is like a feminine word. So Witcher being a gendered word, specifically as masculine, can't be applied to women. It is the general consensus of this argument, from my understanding. Maybe people who make the argument would be okay if instead of calling the game like The Witcher 4, it was called The Witcheress, but I also don't really think that would do it. My counter to this is that despite Witcher being a masculine word, even kind of in English, but in a different way by having on the end of witch, like, waiter. Actually, would that mean that Witcheress is like calling a female waiter a waiteress? Shouldn't it be witchess? Anyway, the word Witcher is applied to Ciri both in the books by Andrzej Sapkowski and also by Witcher 3, by the writers of that. The books also call Ciri a Witcher girl, but from my understanding and my memory of her arc in the books is that she is becoming a Witcher. Or she is, she's one of the Witchers. Something that carried over into the Empress ending of the third game. My personal favorite ending for its bittersweet nature. Another argument against them is that Witchers are an exploration of masculinity. And I feel like this is a much stronger argument. I used to not feel as strongly about this, but around the wolf Witchers at least, yeah, it's pretty obvious. And especially with how ill-prepared they are to really handle Ciri's teenage years. It's more heavily explored with Geralt, but I won't deny that it is part of the Witchers we follow. However, it's not carried over much into the games. Don't get me wrong, I'd love them to do a game about how all these boys who were forced to grow up around only boys and men in an environment where being strong and capable was all that mattered, and how it affected them as adults is something I'd love to see them explore. But I don't see CDPR doing that. I feel like their games have started to kind of move like sexism and gender examination like from the books in having it like fade more into the background of their games more and more. I kind of wish they'd bring it back. Like, we might get some exploration of Ciri being a woman in a man's world, but I don't think it will be a major focus. And I think it's partly because their target audience are men, and as far as I'm aware, it's mainly written by men who probably don't really know how to approach that subject from a woman's perspective. Maybe we'll get it. I'd be interested in it. So, was that really a counter to the argument, or did I just end up kind of agreeing with them? Whatever. Welcome to the end of the video. God, I've done a lot of talking. Maybe I'll do more like this at some point. If this video does well, I'll probably do more Witcher videos. I kind of want to talk about the Third Northern War, the lore around it, speculating what the ramifications for either side winning could be. Probably criticizing how bare bones I felt like the conflict really was compared to like the second game and some of the others. Was also thinking of talking about like magic items, you know, like Elven Rope, Xenovox, the Moonblade, flying brooms, and so on, like listing them, talking about how they came into existence, and you know, like what we know about how items can become magical. And I was also thinking, like, you know, maybe doing one of those like detailed timeline videos covering everything from the earliest point in the universe to everything that happens in the far future. In the meantime, though, I've got 2 more Monkey Island videos on the way, LeChuck's Revenge and Return, so if you're a fan of Monkey Island and Witcher, feel free to check it out. I could do a bunch of Witcher stuff. I know a lot of Witcher lore, and it's fun. I want to try and talk about some stuff that I've not seen other people talk about. So, yeah, let me know if you want to hear more. Regardless, thanks all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!